Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about it for a moment. What if one of the most powerful things you could do to lower your risk of cancer after the age of 60 had nothing to do with medication, nothing to do with expensive treatments, and nothing to do with complicated routines that feel impossible to keep up with? What if it was something so simple, so ordinary, that most people overlook it completely? Now here is where it gets interesting. What if this one habit has been studied for years, quietly confirmed in medical research, but almost never explained in a way that truly makes people stop and take it seriously? Because most people hear about it, nod their heads, and move on with their day. They think, I already know that. But the truth is, they don't. Not in the way that actually matters. And I'll be honest with you, your first reaction might be exactly the same. You might feel like this is just another piece of basic health advice you've heard 100 times before. But I want you to stay with me for a few minutes. Because what I'm about to share is not just about what the habit is, it's about why it works, what it's doing inside your body, and how something small, done consistently, can quietly change the way your body protects itself over time. By the end of this conversation, you're going to look at this one simple daily action very differently. And more importantly, you may realize that you already have access to one of the most powerful tools for protecting your health. You just haven't been using it the right way yet. Before we go any further, I want to take a moment to tell you where this perspective comes from. I've spent a large part of my professional life working with people facing cancer. Not just reading about it in textbooks, but sitting across from real people, having real conversations, sometimes very difficult ones. I've seen patients in the early stages, when there was still time to change direction. And I've also seen those later moments, the ones no doctor ever wants to deliver. And after years of those experiences, one question kept coming back to me. What could we have done differently earlier? Not just in terms of treatment, but in terms of prevention. Because the truth is, cancer doesn't usually appear overnight. It builds slowly, quietly, over time. And for a long time, I kept searching for something practical, something realistic, something people could actually do every day without feeling overwhelmed. Not a perfect solution, not a guarantee, but something meaningful. And over the years, one pattern became very clear to me. There is a daily behavior, simple on the surface, but incredibly powerful when you understand what it's really doing inside your body. That realization changed the way I talk to my patients. And today, I want to share that same perspective with you. Now, before I tell you what that habit is, I need to explain something most people are never told, but it changes how you understand cancer completely. Right now, as you're sitting here listening to me, your body is creating new cells, billions of them over time. That's normal. That's how the body renews itself. But here's the part people don't realize. Every single day, some of those new cells are created with mistakes in their DNA. Tiny errors. Not because something is wrong with you, but because that's simply how biology works. Your body is constantly copying information, and no system is perfect. Now, in a healthy system, your body has 3 powerful lines of defense to deal with those errors. The first is repair. Specialized enzymes move through your cells like skilled mechanics, finding damage and fixing it before it causes trouble. The second is your immune system. You have cells, think of them like patrol officers that recognize when something looks abnormal and remove it. And the third is something called programmed cell death. If a cell is too damaged, your body tells it to shut down and disappear before it can spread the problem. Together, these 3 systems protect you every single day. But here's what changes after 60. These systems don't stop, but they slow down. The repairs aren't as fast. The surveillance isn't as sharp. And the cleanup process becomes less efficient, which means the same small errors your body used to handle easily now have a better chance of slipping through. And this is exactly where the habit comes in. Because once you understand what's happening inside your body, you start to see why this one daily behavior matters so much more than it seems on the surface. Researchers have looked at this from many different angles, across many different types of cancer, and what they found is surprisingly consistent. There is one simple habit that doesn't just affect one part of your system. It supports all 3 of those protective mechanisms at the same time. It helps your body repair damage more efficiently. It strengthens the cells that patrol and remove abnormalities. And it improves the internal environment so damaged cells are less likely to survive and grow. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like something I've heard before. And you're probably right, at least on the surface. But here's the important part. Most people hear the name of this habit and they stop listening. They assume they already understand it. They reduce it to something basic, something optional, something they can always start later. That's the mistake. Because the real value of this habit is not in the name itself, but in how it works inside your body and how consistently you apply it. So before I say it out loud, I want you to stay open for just a moment longer, because the way you think about this is about to change. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Victor. Victor was 67 years old, a retired accountant, the kind of man who liked structure, routine, someone who paid attention to details. He came in for a routine screening, nothing unusual, just something his doctor recommended because of his age. But that appointment didn't go the way he expected. They found several polyps in his colon, not cancer, but not normal either. These were the kind of changes that can move in the wrong direction if nothing is done. And that's when everything started to feel different for him. You could see it in the way he sat down, the way he asked his questions. Because this wasn't just about him. His father had died from colorectal cancer. His brother had gone through prostate cancer a few years earlier. So when he looked at me, he wasn't just asking about test results. He was asking about his future. "What do I do now?" he said. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly, but with real concern behind it. Now, at that moment, there are many directions a conversation like that can go. Tests, follow-ups, monitoring, all important. But I decided to focus on something else first. Something simple, something he could start immediately, something most people underestimate. I explained it to him carefully, and I asked him for one thing. Give it 6 months, stay consistent, then we'll see what changes. He agreed. And what happened next is something I've never forgotten. Now let me tell you what I asked Victor to do. It wasn't a new medication. It wasn't a strict diet. And it definitely wasn't an intense workout plan. It was something much simpler than that. I asked him to move, every day, at a moderate, comfortable pace. Specifically, I asked him to walk. Not casually, not slowly, but at a pace where he could still talk, yet feel his breathing pick up just a little. About 20 to 25 minutes a day, most days of the week. That was it. No gym membership, no complicated schedule, no pressure to push harder. Just consistent, moderate movement. Now, this is where many people misunderstand things. They assume that if something is this simple, it can't possibly make a real difference. Or they think, if I'm going to do it, I should go all in, sweat hard, push myself. But for what we're talking about here, that's not the goal. This isn't about performance. It's about giving your body a steady signal, day after day, to stay active, alert, and responsive. Think of it like turning on a system that's been sitting idle for too long. You don't need to overload it. You just need to wake it up and keep it running. Now, I want to pause here for a moment, because this is the point where many people start to doubt. It sounds too simple. Just walking? That's it? So let me show you what the research actually says. There was a large analysis that followed more than 1 million adults over time. What they found was very consistent. People who stayed physically active during their free time had a noticeably lower risk of developing multiple types of cancer. Not just one, but over a dozen different types. Colon cancer, breast cancer, kidney cancer, even cancers that many people don't immediately connect with lifestyle. And the reduction wasn't small. Depending on the type of cancer and the level of activity, the risk dropped anywhere from around 10% up to nearly 40%. Now think about that for a second. For a condition as serious as cancer, those are meaningful numbers. Another set of findings looked at something even more practical. Adults who reached about 150 minutes of moderate activity per week had lower rates of cancer-related death compared to those who remained inactive. 150 minutes. That's about 20 minutes a day. A single walk. No equipment, no special training, no cost. Just 20 minutes of steady movement, repeated day after day. And that's where this starts to feel very different. Because now, we're not talking about something out of reach. We're talking about something you can begin today. Now let's take a closer look at what's actually happening inside your body when you move this way, because this is where things become very real. The first mechanism is something called DNA repair. Earlier, we talked about how your body constantly creates cells, and how some of those cells contain small errors. That's unavoidable. But what matters is how well your body can find those errors and fix them. Think of it like tiny cracks forming in a wall over time. If you repair them early, the structure stays strong. If you ignore them, they spread. Now, here's what moderate, consistent movement does. It increases the activity of the systems responsible for repairing those tiny cracks. Your body produces more of the enzymes that go in, identify the damage, and correct it before it becomes a bigger problem. At the same time, movement helps reduce the stress that causes those errors in the first place. Less damage coming in, and better repair happening at the same time. That combination is powerful. And what's especially important is this. As we get older, our natural repair systems slow down. But regular movement doesn't just maintain them. It can actually help bring some of that lost function back. In other words, you're not just slowing the decline. You're helping your body regain part of its ability to protect itself, quietly, day by day. Now let's talk about the second mechanism, and this one is especially important as we get older. It involves a part of your immune system called natural killer cells. You don't need to remember the name, just think of them as your body's security team. Their job is very specific. They move through your body, constantly checking cells. And when they find one that looks abnormal, one that doesn't belong, they step in and remove it before it has a chance to grow. It's quiet work. You don't feel it happening. But it's one of the most important defenses you have against cancer. Now, here's what happens after 60. The number of these cells tends to decrease. And even more importantly, their ability to do their job becomes less effective. So not only are there fewer guards, but the ones that remain aren't working at full strength. This is one of the key reasons why cancer risk increases with age. But here's the encouraging part. When you engage in regular, moderate physical activity, something very interesting happens. These cells become more active. They move more efficiently. And they become better at identifying and eliminating abnormal cells. It's almost like you're calling more guards back onto duty and giving them better tools to do their job. And when this happens consistently, day after day, your body becomes much better at catching problems early, before they turn into something serious. Now let's look at the third mechanism, and in many ways, this may be the most important one of all. It has to do with something called chronic inflammation. Now, inflammation is not always a bad thing. In the short term, it's part of how your body heals. But when it stays active at a low level for a long time, that's when problems begin. Think of it like a small fire that never fully goes out. It doesn't burn everything down at once, but it slowly damages the environment around it. Inside the body, that kind of ongoing inflammation creates conditions where abnormal cells are more likely to grow and less likely to be stopped. In other words, it creates a space where cancer can develop more easily. And here's something most people don't realize. Long periods of sitting, very little movement, that kind of lifestyle actually feeds this low-level inflammation, even if everything else seems normal. Now, here's where consistent movement makes a real difference. When you move regularly at a moderate pace, your body begins to lower those inflammatory signals. It reduces the chemicals that keep that slow-burning fire going. At the same time, it increases signals that help calm and balance the system. So day by day, something subtle but powerful is happening. You're changing the internal environment of your body. You're making it less welcoming for the conditions that allow cancer to grow. Not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, quiet shift that builds over time. Now, before you think about starting this habit, there is one mistake I need to talk about, because I see it happen all the time. People hear that movement is good for their health, and they decide to go all in. They push themselves hard. They try to do intense workouts. They think the harder they go, the better the results. And I understand that thinking. It feels logical, but for what we're talking about here, Especially when it comes to cancer prevention, that approach can actually work against you. When exercise becomes too intense, too exhausting, something interesting happens inside your body. Instead of strengthening your immune system, it can temporarily suppress it. For a short period after very intense activity, your body enters a kind of recovery window where your defenses are not operating at full strength. Now, for younger individuals or trained athletes, the body usually adapts over time. But after 60, that recovery can take longer. And if you repeat that cycle too often, pushing hard, then recovering, then pushing hard again, you're not giving your system the steady support it needs. That's why the goal here is not intensity. It's consistency. You want to move at a level where you can still carry on a conversation, maybe a little out of breath, but comfortable. A brisk walk, a relaxed bike ride, light swimming, something you can repeat tomorrow and the day after without strain. Because in this case, doing a little, regularly, is far more powerful than doing a lot, occasionally. Now let's go back to Victor. 6 months after that first conversation, he came back for his follow-up appointment. Same clinic, same chair, but this time there was something different about him. He looked calmer, more at ease. Not because everything was perfect, but because he had taken action. He had done exactly what we discussed. About 25 minutes of brisk walking, 5 days a week. Nothing extreme, nothing complicated, just steady, consistent movement. And here's what we found. The number of polyps had gone down. The remaining one had not progressed. His inflammation markers, which were elevated before, had moved back into a healthier range. And when we looked at his immune activity, it had improved in a measurable way. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not about guarantees. Health is always more complex than a single habit. But what Victor experienced reflects something we see again and again. When you give your body the right signals, consistently, it begins to respond. It starts doing what it was designed to do. Protect, repair, maintain balance. I still remember what he said to me that day. He smiled and said, "I didn't do anything complicated, but somehow I feel like my body is working with me again." And that's really the point of this entire conversation. You don't need to wait for something serious to happen before you act. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need a starting point. So here's what I would suggest. Choose one small window in your day, 20 minutes. Go for a walk, move at a steady pace, keep it simple. Do it again tomorrow. And the day after that? Because the most powerful tool you have is already within you. It just needs a signal to turn it on.